let's go. Huh. They don't make them like us no more. Never made them like us before. Yeah, you dealing with the real hardcore. Yeah, you dealing with the real hardcore. They don't make them like us no more. Nah.
Hey everybody, this is UB with the Choose Inclusion podcast, back here with Nina and Mike as always. And that was a clip that we just heard from our guest today, Michael Acuna. We're really excited to have Michael on the show because we haven't really had a discussion around music yet. You know, we've touched on food and we've touched on just a lot of different areas, a lot of different industries, but we haven't really had a conversation around how music plays into this world of diversity and inclusion. So I want to introduce Michael to the show. Michael, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on here.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are too. And I wanted to start a conversation with your name, your background, and sort of your stage names or your creative names too, because it's really interesting. We were talking a little bit about this before we hit record. But yeah, tell us about who you are, where you're from, your background, and your creative background.
Sure. So my artist name is, I have a few, Ill7, which a lot of people know me by, ILLSE7EN. I got that name early on. I used to be I'm still part of a group called Isolated Generation. And early on, when I was in high school going into like college, Ill7 became my name, mainly because I was studying like different styles of spirituality during that time. So I was going from studying Christianity into studying a lot of 5%er beliefs, which is kind of connected into a lot of Muslim beliefs. So Ill7, 7 standing for God and high consciousness, also tying into the chakras, is really talking about me being awake, ill being illuminated, and 7 being high consciousness, meaning being awake or, you know, being connected. So Ill7 was one of my names that I first went by. And then recently, within the last 2 years, I changed my name to Acuna Black. And Acuna Black was me really embracing my lineage, my heritage, who I am and where I come from within my Afro-Latino background. And within that, the project that I recently released, it's really diving into like narrative and stigma and bias in the sense of the American history connected into slavery, and also the American history connected into just the stigmas and stereotypes that have been perpetuated based off of Blackness. So I touch on a lot of these ideas within my album, Creates a Vintage Dreams.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, it's fascinating to me, especially in this conversation of diversity and inclusion, because you know we always talk about underrepresented groups of people, and you know, so you're coming from two groups, right? Given your background, I think you said your mother's from Mexico, right, and your father's from Haiti.
She's not from Mexico. We have Mexican background. She's from Texas, but
Okay.
My grandmother, she's from Mexico, and then my grandfather was from Mexico, and yeah, my grandfather and grandmother on my dad's side is from Haiti. So you know, third generation in. But yes, like within that narrative, it's an important narrative. I feel that so much when you're talking about like history within the Black perspective is we lose our narrative and where we come from and who we are. So, you know, recently I was a part of an art show that dealt with diving into African history. It was called They Still Live. It was an art exhibit that was at Redline Art Gallery. It got some exposure on CNN and a few other outlets, but the whole layout of what it is was really exploring the lineage and heritage of who we are and where we come from. And the more that I did my own personal background of where I came from, I had Scottish in me, I had Indian in me, I had African in me, I had Jewish in me. I had so many different races, you know, of that you really realize that the things that we don't like about each other is very much playing into the construct of an idea of one another. So it was an important exhibit that helped me with my artwork, just because so much of my art plays into narrative and the ways that perception impacts us. And music itself, it's such an influential thing in the ways that it's a influential tool in the ways that we see one another culturally, in the ways that we're broken into like these different groups. A lot of our music, it plays into our culture and our background and who we are.
Yeah, so like, can you tell us a little bit about, I think a lot of what you're talking about is intersectionality, right? Just the fact that we all, there's so much, not only do people hold multiple identities, but that there's power in, recognizing that there's multiple identities and that we have the ability to kind of work and support each other.
Exactly.
Especially when it comes to underrepresented groups. I'm curious, how have you taken those ideas into the music that you're creating?
Sure. I think like the ways that I've addressed it is really diving into my own personal story. And I think that's what most of us like. A lot of my music and my poetry, the things that I've created in the past, it ties into my own personal narrative, whether it be from an experience from me growing up, an experience of me in the workplace, or, all these different experiences, but really expressing my truth so that other people can learn from it, but also for people who've went through similar situations, they can feel that they're not alone. So in my art, as of recently, I came up through really doing spoken word through like Slam Nuba, Cafe Cultura, a few of these spoken word slam outlets. So I kind of honed my craft doing poetry and writing. And then from there, really embraced hip hop as a platform of me to express myself. So from there, I work in schools as well. So a lot of my writing workshops and the art that I engage with young people, it really goes into self-narrative and using art as a outlet for therapeutic purposes. So a lot of my music and the things that I create, it dives into narrative, and it allows somebody else to look into themselves and see some of the experiences that might have been traumatic to them and kind of unpack that experience and be able to look at it a little bit.
Michael, thank you again for joining us. This is, I love the conversation. I love the Il-7, the Illuminate, 7 chakras, all the symbolisms that you have with your stage names and your artistic side. I love it. I truly believe if all of humanity, as far back as, records, that we were drawing pictures on walls, in caverns and caves. They had early instruments. All of humanity has always learned to express themselves, right? And I think because of that, it creates an ultimate inclusion, as Miss Nina was just talking about, how we get to intersect from one culture to another and really express ourselves. I love this conversation and how we could leverage some of these lessons from an arts and entertainment perspective in a business community, right? Because we know that communities, organizations that really get inclusive, how many different cultures, how many different music styles are in there. And I know you do a lot with kids, and I know you do a lot the arts and entertainment. Do you ever do stuff within, have organizations ever brought you in just to do, some kind of a fun organizational development? Have you done stuff in the corporate world with all your arts and entertainment?
I have. I've done quite a few like collaborations with like universities. I've collaborated with a few attorney law offices, and I collaborated with RTD like a few years ago on narrative, and actually worked with a lot of marketers doing kind of an implicit bias type of workshop, but also just kind of unpacking like the realities of, other people's experiences based off of their identities and the ways they see themselves in the world, and also the ways that the world sees them. So I feel like sometimes like exploring poetry and songs and kind of breaking down the lyrics and getting into like some of the content that's in any art, really, you can learn so much, because I feel that art, it really kind of captures like it's a time capsule in a moment, you know, a lot of the time. And I feel like even in business space, when you're really thinking about like narrative in the ways that we see each other, in that intersectionality, in the ways that we engage in one another, even if we don't have similar backgrounds, there's certain things that we all have common ground on, whether it be artistically, music, movies. It's a variety of different things, or sometimes just business, in the ways that we view on how to approach a certain problem, you know?
Yeah, it's such an important point. And again, tying it to business, you know, it seems like common sense, but most businesses, I think most leaders still feel like their employees, you know, should just naturally be able to speak up and talk about themselves, right? Or speak up when there's an issue. And I think that's a huge misconception here, and why, you know, again, it seems natural that it's just easier for us to express ourselves through music, through art, through writing. But I think that there is a disconnect, and again, this is just a disconnect at the highest of levels, where, you know, personal and business don't mix, right? You're different at home than you are at work. And so at work, we expect you to speak up for yourself and tell your story. But in reality, and I think, you know, if anything, this COVID-19 situation has shown us that, you know, we've absolutely blurred those lines now. And so, you know, it is everything, personal, work, it's all mixed up. And so I love this, and I think it's something that leaders can walk away with and find creative ways to give voice to their employees now, right? Like what are some ways that they can do that? It's like you've been helping them do that through, you know, I love the one class you were talking about, you know, kind of exploring lyrics, right? I mean, what are some other ways in your mind that organizations, that leaders can help their employees find their voice, especially those underrepresented employees, and express those?
Right. I think it's a variety of different ways. I feel like the gift of creativity is that a lot of the time it's a equal. It makes everything, it levels things out, right? So when you hear a song that's talking about a hard subject matter, you're more open to listening to the message because it's on a creative platform and there's a melody behind it. I think that, like, when we're talking about like the workplace and we're talking about creativity and the necessity for creativity in the workplace, I feel that like it kind of evens the playing ground in that industry, in any industry, really allowing somebody to whatever work they're doing and express themselves within that. I think it adds on to any business. And the reason why is because when you have somebody who has a different background culturally, that culture comes out in their work and it comes out in whatever they're engaging. And I think when you give somebody a creative space within the workplace, you're allowing that person to express themselves based off of their experiences and their background. And then within expressing themselves in that, you're benefiting from whatever that experience is, because it becomes a part of your brand as well. It becomes a part of their work and the ways that they express that work. So I think like creativity in the workplace is an important thing, because everything that they're doing is an expression of where they come from and who they are.
I think that having the right facilitator in the room for those kinds of discussions is really, though. I mean, I think when, you know, I think with a lot of these workshops and stuff, like if the message is coming from the wrong person, it can just come off the wrong way. And so I think, you know, I love the fact that you're doing this. I'm kind of curious. You've worked at law firms, you've worked at government agencies, you worked at universities. I'm curious, how has the culture been different in those different types of places, and how has that impacted your approach in terms of going to them and talking to them?
Sure. I think you're right as far as facilitating a conversation. And I think a lot of people don't understand that either, is facilitating a conversation. It takes skill because you have to understand the people in the room. And you also are being a referee within that, meaning that you're trying to keep your bias out of a situation so that people can come to their own revelations on the ways they see things. And I feel that based off of my background, being a hip hop artist, and in the ways that I engage, I automatically have a little bit of an edge just because I'm constantly entertaining and I'm constantly out there engaging with people, which makes me a great facilitator in that space. But I think that when we're really kind of like diving into like different businesses initially, when they see someone like me, they don't know exactly how to take me just because they're like, what is this guy about to do? Some hip hop for us? And I think because of the way that I've grown up and the experiences I've done creatively within music, I appeal to a lot of different people because I have to be open to take in a lot of different perspectives. And I think having an artist or a creator in business space, it allows them to like make those connections where in business space it's sometimes hard for people to make those connections because of where their minds are at. So in the attorney space, when I've done at law schools, I think initially they've had a little bit of like, okay, what is he about to do? And then as soon as we get into it, they find it engaging within like the conversation space and they open up. As far as the colleges and some of the marketing companies that I'd worked with in the past, I think they're interested in my perspective. I think there's a little bit of openness in those spaces, a little bit more than an attorney space just because of what it is and the style of business it is. But colleges and marketing companies have been interested in collaboration just because I have an organic perspective in the ways that I see the world, and I engage in hip hop culture, which is popular culture. So it kind of frames the ways that a lot of people are conditioned and a lot of perspective in the way. And I kind of counter that perspective of what commercial hip hop is. So countering the perspective of commercial hip hop and kind of giving the culture of where it comes from and what it's about, open people to thinking about the ways they look at the world and the ways that you have to challenge a narrative, just because the narrative is probably deeper than the rap on the outside, you know?
I love this, and I love hearing how well, and again, I'm the token blind guy on the crew here, Michael. So so you're I love hearing that. Okay, so you said before our little chat before you got on, you're the darkest of your family, so you got a darker pigment to your skin. And so, but you're going into, because there's not, I don't care if it's financial services, healthcare, there's not an organization, a vertical out there right now that doesn't need an infusion of creativity. Because, you know, for our global problems, like COVID has proven, like we've got to start thinking creatively on how to connect, on how to keep our planet, how to write down so there's not a vertical out there, whether it's, you know, what we think of stuffed shirt attorneys or stuffy financial services. Every industry needs this infusion of creativity. So I love hearing how you're going out there and, you know, because I was in private America for 20 years, and I would have loved one of our leaders to have brought in a creative, you know, individual like yourself to challenge, you know, software developers, designers in a way to expand their creativity. Because when you start to get exposed to other, you know, forms of entertainment and art, that all it does, it starts to, you know, you realize like, oh, my borders of creativity start to expand with all of that. And so I love that. Can you give some examples of like, you know, like on the fly here, we didn't practice this, but taking words from a song, taking some lyrics, and how you would engage an organization. I'm so stimulated by this conversation.
Sure. So like, I mean, there's so many different examples I feel musically of just how a narrative kind of plays out. But I guess one example that I give is I'll take an Outkast song, okay, for example, and like kind of break down what he's actually talking about in that song and kind of like how that applies to a demographic based off of their region and some of the things they're going through. But in Outkast, Andre 3000, he has a verse where it goes, I went to the mall the other day, heard a call from the other way. where I just came from. So brother was saying something, talking about, hey man, do you remember me from school? No, not really, but he kept smiling like a clown, facial expression looking silly. He kept asking me, what kind of car you drive? I know you made buku buku from all them songs y'all made. And I replied, I've been going through the same things he has. True, I have more fans than an average man, but not enough loot to last me to the end of the week. I live by the beat like you live check to check. You don't move your feet, then I don't either. So we like neck to neck. Yes, we done come a long way like them slim cigarettes from Virginia. This ain't gonna stop, so we just gonna continue. Like that song, right? If you really listen to what he's talking about
wait,
within
hold
that.
on. Wait, that was badass. That was awesome. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you. Awesome. But just listening to that verse and listening to what Andre 3000 is talking about, like we look at Outkast now and they're considered like icons in hip hop. But early on in his career, him coming up in the career, the realities of what he's doing as an underground independent artist trying to survive. And where he's coming from Decatur, he's coming from Atlanta, Georgia. So his realities and the things that he's trying to overcome, he's a good kid, he's living in a hard environment. Within living in that hard environment, he's still expressing himself artistically and creatively within doing spoken word, doing hip hop, which shows a level of an intelligence that he's able to articulate his reality through art. So like when we're really thinking about it, the way that plays into like policing and the ways that plays into like a job, we have a lot of people who come from hard backgrounds that overcome extreme environments. And then within that, they still shine. So the way it really makes me like kind of interpret that is like when police are policing neighborhoods. If you have a stigma and a stereotype about the environment that you're policing, you think that everybody in that environment is dangerous, right? And then you listen to somebody who's expressing their emotions and feelings, you're forced to deal with the empathy aspect of who you are as a person, because that person's letting you know, like, yeah, I know it looks good from the outside, or you may think I'm a thug from the outside, but if you have a conversation with me, you can see that I'm an intelligent person, that I have struggles that I've gone through and some that I've overcome and some that I still may be going through. And then within that, I'm a person. I'm a human being just like you. And I think that's the power of art, is that it breaks down like these ideas of one another, and it forces you to look at the emotion in the person. And expression, regardless if it's a painting or a spoken word piece or you cooking food for somebody, there's so many different ways that we can express who we are to another person so that they can relate to us as a human.
Yeah,
so well said.
Oh man, yeah, I agree. Like it's
up right now.
Yeah,
video version of this.
Right. Well, and where my head immediately goes then, so to me, because we've had this discussion before around food, where people who take issue with immigrants crossing the border from Mexico, for example, but who go to Mexican restaurants, like there's sort of this disconnect. I think it's part of it is exactly what you're talking about, which is just a lack of awareness and really listening to somebody else, listening to their story. And art and music and food are bridges between there. But you mentioned empathy, and I think that's that's the key to unlocking the gate so that we can cross that bridge all the way, right? To really listening and understanding somebody else who on the surface, and again, this just goes back to our biases, but why we why certain people are racist, or why they have these views and stories, assumptions of other groups of people. But it's funny how our brains work. And I think music and art and all the things you're talking about are a great way, a stepping stone. But what's the rest of the work that we have to do that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think like at the point that you reach empathy, right? I think it's accountability at that point in my mind, right? Like once you've been open to experience and like be open to somebody else's reality, I think, and what I mean by accountability, meaning that like we all innately have stigmas, biases in the ways that we see ourselves in this world. So
Right.
it's constant work and constant reevaluation of ourselves in who we are in the moments, because a moment is where those moments are where like narratives really are impactful, right? Like it's an interview, and like trying to like watch your biases in the ways that you're interviewing somebody, or it's a student that seems like a problem in your class, and like you realize that this kid doesn't have enough food or doesn't get enough sleep. So like the empathy at that point is allowing accountability to like really let that person's narrative be more complex, right? Like it's really
Yeah.
easy to point the finger at a person, and and that's the problem with I feel mainstream politics when we're talking about Democrat and Republican. It's like they're both right and they're both wrong on a variety of different levels. And like when you're separated within political lines, you can't see the gray area of common ground. Like, yeah, you don't have to like everything that a Republican likes, and you don't have to like everything that a liberal likes. But even though you may not agree with everything that they believe in, there's truth in it somewhere, And I think that a lot of the time we get so polarized in our points of view and the ways that we see the world that we don't allow the common ground in the gray area to be able to grow. Because the gray area is where we all have common ground, meaning that like the polarizing right and left point of view that we may look at the world as, it's not really allowing, the world isn't white and black. The world is white, black, Latino, Asian, Native American, LGBTQ, like there's so many different shades outside of white and black, right? But like we get so caught up in the right and the left in ways we see it that we don't allow the nuances. So I think the accountability and checking ourselves when we notice that the narrative is becoming the main thing, that we're not complexing the narrative of a person or the narrative of a demographic or area. Like we have to like challenge ourselves to experience it as well, be able to be open to experience it and like take in the full experience of somebody based off where they're from or who they are in their background, because you're going to learn something from it. The thing that we get stuck in is ignorance, and ignorance is a weapon that can be manipulated by anybody who notices that there's a demographic that's ignorant. Like President Trump, if you look at him as a president and he looked at a demographic of people who were marginalized that nobody was paying attention, and he utilized the manipulation to go ahead and condition them and vote for him. So like when you see somebody who is ignorant, if you're a person who is wise and you can see it, you can educate that person and enlighten them, or you can utilize it as a weapon and control them better.
Yeah, one of the things that I always say is that, we're all racist, we're all ableist, we're all homophobic, we're all transphobic. And I think there's a kind of understanding that like even if you are disabled, you are ableist. Even if you, because we've been raised with a narrative, right? We've been raised with this narrative of, being other, being, othered is therefore being less than. And, you can't avoid that narrative, like even if you identify with that group. And so I think that like starting with that baseline that we're all kind of building our identities around a narrative that's been established, but then recognizing that we can change that narrative, right? Like we can change it for ourselves, but also we can share that story and help enlighten other people about this narrative that is unique to us and unique to our communities and to our families and to, like the people that we associate with. And I love the work that you're doing, because I think that's huge. Like, I think that's the human element that needs to happen in order to change these things that we've been brought up with or that we hear from the outside world.
I agree. A lot of my background growing up, my dad was in the military, so we traveled quite a bit. And, I never grew up in one area, so I was able to see a variety of different parts of the country when I was young, from the East Coast to the West Coast and a little bit down south because my mom's from Texas. And I think that is one thing that always kept me open to challenging narratives, because when you move around as a military brat, you're always making new relationships with people. And if you're not open, then you don't have friends. So I think that's one of the things that helped me as I was coming up and growing up with really just challenging the ways that I see the world, is the diversity that I always kept myself around and not isolating myself in any one group.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. I refer to that as my stained glass view of the world. Same, because of my dad, we moved around a lot as well. And yeah, man, it just, that experience, it never gave me the opportunity to feel like I was better than anybody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Seeing different people in their own environments and being welcomed into those communities, and, going to school with all these different, people from different backgrounds. I never had that opportunity to become privileged, I guess, is the kind of what I'm looking at, right? Because we were all on this even playing field of all coming from different backgrounds. I know, Mike Hess, be careful. We'll slip there, but
Well,
like I didn't get the chance to become evil, I guess is what I was trying to say.
Well, I think if you equate evil to, or bad or good to, like what you were saying, I think it was very articulately said to, with perspective and taking empathy and charging into accountability. And what we talk here routinely on, Michael, is like that's a choice. You have to choose. Like accountability is something that you got to choose into, right? Like it's something you make conscious decisions on. And you're not able to plead, or you can plead ignorance, but the organizations that continue to choose into true inclusion, and some of the methodologies that you're using to invoke and inspire and expand creativity, I think are phenomenal. So I got to challenge you one more time. I would love, and Ubaldo, Nina, if you guys are good with this, I'd love to hear you do some spoken word, my friend. I'm so inspired, and I would love to use this platform to share out some of your spoken word, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Sure.
to take us home. That would be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate you letting me share some words with you. I'll share like a piece from Creative Vintage Dreams. It's called Nina, and it's dedicated to Nina Simone. I wrote it as a poem, and then it became a song later. So I'll share that one, and see where we're at after that. See if I'll share another one or something. So Nina, I can feel her in the spirit. Yeah, I hear her in the beat. She the conscience of the soul to make the weirdo feel unique. She the vibe to make the mind connect the chakras to the soul. Translation of the spirit that gets caught up in the flow. I speak in code, a story told, the future holds and knows it well. I could tell up in the spell the message told the soul rebel. Now I'm falling on a mission, in a mission of the play. Put the view upon display, see what she did today. I know, mind gone, slipped out of space, walking in the spirit. Calling it my happy place. I caught the gas on a paper chase. In a one-man band, you keep your own pace. Simone, Nina, moan, halfway home. Take me to the water center, man, I'm told. Black is the color of my true lover's hair. Little girl blue, fortune tells stories there. Little girl blue, fortune tells stories there. Black is the color of my true lover's hair. They told me dreams manifest from old life pain. We strive to be great in these gladiator games. Power, rain, flame standing on the back of most children. Willing to be great if the closed minds listen. Break the tradition. Fish for Atlantis. The children of the no indigo, new planet. Gotta transcend new standard. Gotta wait your turn, transcend new standard. The people breaking boundaries. The system can't stand it. All of the fallen, stalling in greatness. Artificial intelligence, who the fakest? Light beam shining out the eyes of the future. Christ mind, Superman, kill Lex Luthor. Feel all the pain in your chest. We find it in a moment. We take another breath, like Simone, Nina, moan, halfway home. Take me to the water center, man, I'm told. Black is the color of my true lover's hair. Little girl blue, fortune tells stories there. Little girl blue, fortune tells stories there. Black is the color of my true lover's hair.
Love it. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the perfect ending. And on that note, Michael, amazing. thank you for this conversation. I think it's going to,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was a blast talking to y'all.
Oh, this was awesome. I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people. So thank you all for listening in, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Choose Inclusion podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And you can see closed captioning for this podcast on our YouTube channel. You can find us online on our website, chooseinclusion.com, and contact us on Twitter @chooseinclusion.